Thanks to Mark and Zena for a really great projection. That was great.
Yeah, thanks to Zena. Gosh, this is the first time, I mean, I've known you a while. I've seen most of these films as they were being made, but not all of them, a number of them. But I've never seen them like all together like this. And although projection is a distracting thing, you know, I'm not able to enjoy it maybe quite as intimately as everybody here. I was really struck by so many kind of common threads and things that were really exciting to me. And I thought like about halfway through the show, I was thinking about this filmmaker who is really important to me, which is Robert Nelson, who once told me that he wasn't really sure what art or filmmaking was about, other than it had something to do with like hanging out with your friends and having fun. And I thought about that during this because I was thinking about how much you involve people that you're interested in, that you care about, and they're really part of the whole like cinematic, I guess, landscape and language of your work. And I was wondering if you could talk about that and maybe your relationship and your filmmaking practice and your art practice to community and to just your friend circle too.
Yeah, totally. I think that's just, that's how I like to make films. It's really fun to involve other people. I'm always casting friends, obviously, because I trust what they're gonna do and how they're gonna look on camera, and I love orchestrating things. I can't say that I enjoy, especially like directing people. I'm not like amazing at that, but it's just really fun to make things with people. And I would say like Decoy is kind of an outlier. It's black and white and mostly shot in the studio with still images, but other than that, I'm like calling in all these friends and muses sometimes to be on camera and do funky things for me. Yeah, I don't know, it's just a spirit of music and art, and I don't know, it's just funner that way. I don't know.
Well, it seems like you're responding a lot to what you may already know or appreciate about these people too. Like I was thinking, were you like, oh, I know somebody who can touch their hands, because I can't do that, but I was like, maybe a lot of people can do that. I don't know, like just get down there and get your hands flat on the ground. And were you like, oh yeah, so-and-so can do that, so I want to film that? Or how does that, something like, that's just one example.
Sure, I mean, like that thing aside, but also just, I don't know, I think all my friends are sexy and hot and want them, I just love the way certain people move and talk, and occasionally I'll ask someone and it's not working out time-wise, but for the most part I'm like, I want Cosmo to do this thing, or I want Michael Bison to do this thing. And it usually works out that way. So yeah, it's always very specific, and I'm always happy when they can be on the camera. And I'm not going to name everyone because there's a lot, but yeah, most of the people that are on camera, on film, and also behind the camera are here tonight. So thank you for always being willing to do it. Yeah.
Round of applause.
Yes.
So you mentioned Decoy, and that is like an unusual one. It's in black and white. It's, as you said, in the studio. Is this sort of, I mean, is this like a quarantine-y, pandemic era piece?
It's not,
right?
No.
Yeah. So what's the story with that?
Most films I'm like trying to, or just be conscious of doing something new every time, but then at the same time I'm always like, we all have patterns and like repeat things, and that's fine, please embrace that. But yeah, that film was made, I'm blanking on the year, but basically in response to certain political figures, public rhetoric around building border walls, and just wanting to respond to that, like certain people using divisive language like that to divide in order to get elected into office. And I wouldn't say that I've made something as specifically political of that. I've definitely made things that are overarching politically, but yeah, I just felt the need to do that. Also had a lot of black and white stock in the fridge, but I thought it would be appropriate to use black and white for that like binary idea of bridges and walls and lots of other things. That film is not like a straight through line of concepts. It's bridges and walls, binary opposites, things that do something really specific really well that you have to deal with, but it's like the idea board for it is really like ping-pongy and spirally in the way that other films aren't for me, yeah.
Well, and of course, that's the movie where the program title that I suggested comes from, which is something pretending to be something else. Because when I was looking at, as I said, I'd seen most of these. Actually, I hadn't seen that one before somehow. But when I looked at that one, that line really stood out to me because I thought, my God, it's almost like a slogan for the filmmaking of Alee Peoples in a way, because you're so often working with these like kind of coded gestures and symbols and structures. I think in my program note I said something, there's almost something like Rebus-like about the films. Like they're kind of inviting you to think about, is this something I'm supposed to solve or figure out or not necessarily? And I love that ambiguity you play with. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit about your relationship to kind of coded meaning. Because it's not just like pure symbolism, pure metaphor. There's some other really kind of ambiguous, interesting, complex language at work.
Yeah, no, that's a really apt observation. Sometimes it's like I just want the smoke and mirrors to look like the smoke and mirrors because I think that's funny. But also for a long time I've always been interested in language and symbolism, largely speaking, but so not only in like fraternal orders, but street signs, how you communicate to someone that you're of the same ilk or into certain same things, so playing with symbols always, and just understanding film as a linear language in the way that we read things, certain people left to right in certain orders, and so editing is that great device where you get to put things in certain orders and how they play out. Sometimes there are truly rebuses in there that I want you to read. I know it's going by really fast sometimes and you're not gonna get it. And other times I think they're more like symbolic symbols for what feeling I'm trying to convey. Yeah, does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then that gets to a question I really wanted to ask, and I've kind of always wanted to ask you about just randomly, which is about your editing process, because I can't even imagine how it works. But I've come to realize that editing, especially in filmmaking, is so particular to each person, each artist, like how they approach it. And I'm just completely amazed at your editing and how you construct these things. And in a way, I'm wondering, are you accumulating a certain amount of material you have specific ideas for and then finding the structure somehow just in the process? Or do you have a lot of it preconceived? Or
For the most part, it's pretty straight ahead. Like I usually have a shot list and I shoot, and then I have all that, and then I go and edit. And I love editing, but it usually happens very quickly because I kind of know how I want the feeling, and I'm always paying attention to like an emotional arc that's gonna come up and come down, and I am pulling that just from like pop music, how music does that to you, makes you feel a certain way, and then like has a nice come down or a drop off.
it's like good mixtape practices, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I've been making mixtapes a long time before film editing, so lots of practice there. Yeah, but it's pretty cut and dry. It's not like exciting. I'm not like editing it and then being like, oh, I need another shot and go out and get it. It's usually like I've collected all the shots and then I move through it that way.
It's not like you got like 100-to-1 shooting ratio and you're like, now what if this is gonna work?
Yeah,
it's a very preconceived in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, film's expensive, so yeah.
Well, and when we were talking about what to show tonight, you mentioned there was this early piece, this double Super 8 piece, Crown and Glory, that you said, am I remembering right, you said it kind of broke open a lot of things for you when you were starting to really kind of think about what you wanted to do in filmmaking?
Mm-hmm.
And like, could you, because I didn't actually ask you further about that, I figured I'd ask right now. Like, what was it that did for you?
The sound edit kind of cracked things open for me. Music has always been important in my life. My dad was always playing a really wide variety of music, and then as a teenager I got really into music, and yeah, that's a constant in my life, engaging with music, listening to music. So getting to pick apart sounds, like I got really into looping, obviously, but I lost my train of thought. Yeah, well, but I'm not a musician, and so being able to like build soundtracks in that way is something really, really engaging and exciting to me. So yeah, I get to play with music in that way, so.
And then is Roger Williams the one you made essentially right after that?
I think so.
Because it's such an interesting contrast too. Because there's a lot, you're dealing kind of with American identity and American history in a lot of these films actually.
Mm-hmm.
But that film is in some ways particularly different than Crown and Glory, but I love that they both sort of represent aspects of your practice that then we see throughout everything since.
Yeah, and Boys of Summer was somewhere in there too, but yes, Crown and Glory and Roger Williams, definitely Americana. I was really embedded with American iconography that was everywhere in our money, on our buildings, and like where it was coming from, fascism. And so yeah, Crown and Glory is just kind of like a big messy collage. And then Roger Williams, obviously I wanted it structured like a mockumentary with another story folded into it. I was thinking about Crown and Glory watching it, and just to like give it context, that was made in the fall of 2008 on the eve of basically Obama's election, and just coming out of 8 years with George W. Bush, and for the first time, like when he was in office, the first time in my life, just seeing like knee-jerk patriotism happening and being really confused and whiplashed by that. And then 8 years later, when I'm making that film, I kind of took the bait of like hope with a new political leader. And so just wrestling with those feelings, but so that film is like I'm collecting all these images that have to do with the head and anything like above the head, not only like literally, but just like psychic space of the head. So that's what most of those images are.
How much of that stuff was influenced in any way by suddenly, I mean, well, maybe not so much suddenly, but being in New England? Because as somebody who grew up in New England, I mean, you're kind of surrounded by that shit. So, I mean, it was
Totally, yeah. I grew up in the Midwest, and then living out there, yeah. I mean, and I feel like it's more obvious, the American iconography, and just the buildings are old for this country in that settling time. So it was like more obvious to me, and maybe a little more enticing, just having been someone that like moved there and was excited about that history. And yeah, Roger Williams is like, that is like so New England, like trashy, ghosty. That's kind of two adjectives from a program of Mike Stoltz, like trash, ghost, music, insular, like winter time. The Providence scene was pretty like cliquey and exclusive, I would say, but also like a very thin veneer of that. It's not hard to get into that, but yeah. I don't know, that's all right there. Like, so once I heard about the root actually being an actual object, it's like, how can you not follow that thread? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, like every town in New England, it has some kind of local obscure patriotic hero, right?
Yeah, it's just mystery, old shit, like addicts, I don't know. Yeah.
But then when you come to LA, and what I'm getting at is this, you seem really responsive to your surroundings, obviously, like, I mean, so responsive, but not in just the like, hey, here's a palm tree, there's a palm tree everywhere, a palm tree, but it's, I don't know, really kind of thinking about what the light is like, what the community is like, what the landscape is like, urban and natural, and like really engaging with it. And like, so, I mean, you must have a conscious inspiration from wherever it is you are in your landscape, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just trying to pay attention to surroundings all the time. I think, like most of us, I have very similar patterns of where I travel to work and for art and to friends' things. And so once you just notice things over and over again, they can stick in your mind and become something else further down the line. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing backdrop here, so it's not hard to find a good location and time the sunlight just right. I don't know.
And this is one of those locations right here,
It is,
as you
yeah.
said, from the very last shot of the last film. Does anybody have any questions? If you don't mind taking some questions. Back there.
I really like
He was basically a white settler. It's been a minute since I've thought about this, but he was part of the Protestant church and then said something that upset them, and so he got like outcasted, but then apparently like made friends with the Narragansett Indians, and they like gave him some land. But he is credited on paper, in cement, on plaques as being the founder of of Providence, Rhode Island. And it's a very small city, so his icon and image is kind of like everywhere on the seal. So yeah, if you haven't like spent much time in New England, you may not know Roger Williams. But yeah, that's him in a nutshell.
Has anybody seen The Root in this room? Maybe a couple people? No, I was just curious. I never have.
No.
Anybody else?
They wouldn't let me film it.
Yeah, well, it's an absence for sure.
Yeah, and that's so like
It's kind of a red herring too.
Totally, like if I had filmed it, it's like behind a weird cage and not lit very well. Like it would have looked like shit anyway. So yeah, at the time I remember being really bummed, but also like a young filmmaker, and also I was making films incredibly fast. So the idea of like circling back in 8 months like didn't even occur to me. I was just like, this is a challenge. Like, how else can I represent the Root? They were like remodeling the room it was in or something, and they were just like, no.
So it was in their eyes a practical reason you couldn't film it. It wasn't like, oh, it's not allowed to be filmed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you ever find any moments where the work surprises you as opposed to you driving whatever it is that you're trying to assemble, where something occurs where you're putting things together and it just speaks to you serendipitously saying this is a better way to do this?
Maybe, I don't know, that's hard to answer. Like, yes, of course, like happy accidents when you work with a medium like film, like stuff's gonna mess up and it might be better than what you thought. But I would say for the most part, I'm like, not forcing it, but I'm just like, this is what I want it to look and feel like, and I'm making that happen. But also like, I'm timid, lazy, so sometimes I'm like, let's just get the film going rather than coming back and getting the perfect shot. But I don't know. I don't know. I like watching them. I like watching them in a room with people. You can feel things. So, yeah.
Yeah.
The music, when you're editing and the looping, particularly like the low end kind of stuff, do you, like what sort of sequence is that coming in? Are you cutting, you mentioned you have like a list already set in a lot of cases, bits that you're editing quickly. Do you ever have like loops, sort of like ideas sitting around, or like what's sort of that? It feels kind of ridiculous in a way.
In the early days when I was filming, I was like really excited about specific loops matching to the images, and that kind of faded away, and I got more into other types of sounds, narration. I didn't want to be just piling loops on top forever and ever. Yeah, did that answer your question? Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of, like, I love earworms. I love like hearing songs and passing cars or grocery shopping, and then 3 days later being like, why is Katy Perry stuck in my head? But also just listening to music that you like and being like, oh, that guitar lick is like really sweet. But I can't say that I like catalog those away. I think if you're a lover of music, I think it's just like in you if you're listening to music all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because my question is also related to sound and music, but it's a very significant part of your films, and it was really interesting to see them all together and to feel how powerful the sound and music is in all of them, at least in my appreciation of them. And I'm curious to hear more about your process with sound. Like, as you're filming, do you already have them there, the ideas of what you're going to do with the sound? Is it inspiring how you're filming things, or is it when you're putting the images together, you're just like free improvising, creating sounds as you watch how they're fitting together? Like, I just feel like I'd like to hear more about that.
Sure, I think it just depends on the specific film. Now I'd like to build in a lot more space with, like the early ones, it's like sample, 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 beat, like rhythm. And so now I try to build in a lot more sound. There's some very easy instrumentation on keyboards or guitar or bass that I've done, playing with dialogue, but it really just depends on like what's on the screen. And now it's definitely like this, I'm building the sound along with the edit. But something like the last film, Standing Forward Full, I knew that images, I wanted to make a really rapid edit film, very fast paced, so it was gonna be like a barrage of images. So I knew that the soundtrack should just be like one driving thing, not like, it would just be too much to have other collaged sounds coming in and out. So yeah, dialogue with music, making more space, yeah. I love you too, Toonie.
Can you talk about like how like your practice of filmmaking alongside your other art practices? You make amazing screen prints, you paint, you sew, you do so many things, and I'm always curious to know like where does filmmaking weave into this? Does it inform it? Is it like magical to your other practices?
I used to think of them as being really different and separate, but over the years, just doing it for a minute, like I do see connections with textile work. I mean, it's all very tactile, and it's why I'm using film, is because I can touch it and handle the cameras. So yeah, sewing, and there's things like threading is the same as like threading a projector, loading a camera. And then there's, yeah, the screen printing and textile work also deals with language in a way, just in a really different way, where you just have like one image as opposed to 5 or 12 minutes to work with that. Yeah, I have done some sculptures with film that's dealing with like reading from left to right, but yeah, more and more they're connected, but mostly just tactile, and I like touching things.
I love you too. I was curious about your scripts, because you have different films with completely different types of scripts, but how much of these scripts are written by you, or how much of them are taken elsewhere?
Yeah, most of them are written by me, but I didn't really realize this until recently, but my latest film, Hate Sweet Pea, there is dialogue in it, but I didn't write any of that. My mom wrote it, and then it is scenes from The Never-Ending Story. So that is the dialogue from that. But all of the other films, it's me writing, getting in a mood, thinking about what the film is gonna be. Yeah, it's a pretty quick process. Not the best writing editor, but yeah.
Regarding Hey Sweet Pea, I mean, my first time seeing it was when I think you sent me the link to look at for this show, and I've seen it a few times now. And as also somebody who has been dealing with an aging mother, and I remember buying groceries for her like online so she could get them delivered because she couldn't go out. Like, it really kind of hit home in a more intimate way even than your other work. And I was thinking about how your work all has this kind of wonderful intimacy, but this one kind of even more so. It's like another maybe level close, because it seems quite autobiographical. And I'm wondering, was that a conscious step for you, or what? How did that feel to work with that kind of material?
Totally, but I was also really trepidatious about like making a mom film and also making a sentimental film. I feel like a handful of my films, they are very laden with like feelings and emotions, and I'm always trying to like kind of rein that in a little bit. yeah, but I just had to do that. That's what was going on in my life. And my mom aside, like I do enjoy recording voicemails just to like crystallize someone's voice and what was going on in that time. So I have a lot of voicemails from her. But yeah, just dealing with the role reversal and like child-parent relationship. Yeah, wanted to work that into a film. It's crazy to hear that now, because that, I'll just say generally, let's say that was like a year ago, like my mom sounds really different from that now. Like she doesn't leave me messages like that anymore. So it's kind of like, it's great, but it's like a little pangy in a way. Yeah. Yeah. But it's all good. She's healthy. Yeah.
Well, actually, let's end there.
Let's go hang
and
out.
Send